July 7th, 2024. Two men were found dead in the forests of Virginia. Bodies crushed, bikes shattered, no blood. But one thing remained: massive footprints that don't match any known animal. Here's the terrifying part. This exact stretch of the Appalachian Trail was silently shut down by U.S. authorities for 3 weeks, after a string of unexplained disappearances dating back 40 years. I've hiked that trail myself, and what I saw out there made seasoned rescue teams flee the woods overnight. In this video, you'll uncover the theory behind a killer Bigfoot species never officially classified, a heat map of disappearances since 1983, the truth about a missing camera that captured what no one was meant to see. Michael, 34, a wildlife biologist, survived 72 hours lost in the same forest. He described seeing a creature over 10 feet tall, carrying a bleeding deer head. His account matches the victim's scene detail for detail. If you skip this now, you might never know what's truly hiding in the Appalachian woods. It started with the kind of morning that tricks you into feeling safe. A soft veil of sunlight spilled through the Appalachian canopy in Washington County, Virginia. On July 7th, 2024, three friends, Nolan Rivers, Patrick Hale, and Marcus Webb, set off early, tires crunching lightly on gravel, laughter tucked between breath and breeze. It was supposed to be just another trail ride. A few hours in nature, some photos, maybe a cold drink at the end. The kind of thing you do 100 times, until the one time that changes everything. Nolan, the quiet one, a graphic designer who saw the world in framed compositions, always had his camera strapped to his back. Patrick, full of energy, taught high school phys ed. He was the kind of guy who could talk a stranger into hiking a mountain. Marcus, newer to the group, was still learning the rhythm. He kept to the rear, slower, more cautious. He'd never said it out loud, but something about this forest unsettled him, as if it was listening. And then it listened back. Mid-morning, somewhere between casual silence and deep woods unease, Marcus slowed. The trees, he thought, seemed closer than they should be, their shadows longer than what the sun suggested. His breathing picked up, quiet at first. Then came the snap, loud, too loud. Like bone, not branch. He froze. Birds scattered overhead in chaotic flight. And then, the unmistakable, gut-punching thud of something heavy hitting the ground ahead. When Marcus rounded the bend, what he saw would haunt him forever. Nolan's bike, split in half, twisted like a pretzel, blood smeared across the dirt, a glove ripped, tangled in brush, and on the earth, fresh and deep, a footprint. Bare? Gigantic. 5 toes. No claw marks, no shoe tread, just wrong. In that moment, nothing made sense, but everything inside Marcus screamed to run. And what came next proved this wasn't some random animal attack. This was deliberate, calculated, brutal. Because what they found later that day, 2 bodies mangled with inhuman force, crushed ribs, nearly severed neck, defied every wildlife pattern known in the region. And just when authorities rushed to label it a bear attack, despite footprints that vanished into nothing and wounds that bore surgical violence, Marcus whispered something that turned every ranger's stomach cold. It was watching us all morning. What he saw in the trees, tall, dark, moving without sound, wasn't a bear. It wasn't even close. And here's the part no one ever reported. So ask yourself, what could twist a bike in half, crush a man's chest with a single blow, and then disappear into thin air, leaving only dread and a footprint behind? This wasn't just an attack. It was a message. And it begs the question, is something out there, hiding in the American wilderness, smarter, stronger, and far more patient than we ever imagined? They started early, before the summer heat could rise, when the trail still held on to its cool breath from the night before. The northern access point of the Appalachian Trail in Washington County, Virginia, looked peaceful. Almost too peaceful. Nolan Rivers adjusted the strap of his camera as they pedaled off, the shutter bouncing lightly against his back. Patrick Hale, full of energy as always, cracked a joke about the uphill climb ahead, and Marcus Webb, trailing behind, kept mostly to himself, eyes flicking between tree trunks, as if reading a language only he understood. The morning moved quietly. The only sounds were tires rolling over gravel, the occasional bird call, the distant rustle of squirrels. A gentle breeze slid through the canopy, letting beams of golden light flicker across the trail like strobe flashes. Nolan rode near the front, occasionally stopping to snap a photo. Moss on stone, sunlight cutting through mist, the kind of beauty most people miss. Patrick would wait up for him, stretching, always smiling, always encouraging. "Take your time, man," he'd say. "Nature isn't going anywhere." But Marcus felt something. It wasn't fear, not at first. More like a presence, a watching. Like they weren't alone. He didn't mention it, not yet. Just let the distance grow a little between him and the others. Something about the trees. They felt too still, and when he looked deeper into the brush, it was like looking into a photo that had been blurred just enough to hide something behind the leaves. He shook it off, told himself it was just new trail nerves. A few minutes later, the trail narrowed between thick undergrowth, shadows closing in from either side. Patrick and Nolan kicked up speed, laughing, calling back to Marcus, telling him to catch up. But Marcus slowed. Every part of him told him not to follow. That something up ahead wasn't right, and then, like a fault line snapping beneath his feet, everything shifted. The forest exploded in sound. A loud crack, like a tree limb splintering under too much weight. Birds erupted from the treetops in a panic, and then a deep, resonant thud. Not the kind that echoes, the kind that ends. Marcus froze. He blinked, heart pounding, breath locked in his chest. The sun, just moments ago soft and gold, now seemed to glare harshly through the trees, casting shadows that looked more like figures than branches. He pushed forward, legs shaking, forcing the pedals to turn. He rounded the bend, and his world stopped. Nolan's bike was on the ground. No, not on the ground. Destroyed. Split at the frame. Chain snapped, wheel bent like twisted wire. Blood streaked the dirt like someone had been dragged. A glove, Patrick's, lay torn at the base of a tree, fingers still curled as if reaching. And then Marcus saw it, a footprint. Bare, enormous, not human, but not animal either. 5 toes, no claws. The impression so deep it sank into the soft earth like concrete. That was the moment he understood. They hadn't stumbled into nature's teeth. They'd been chosen. What kind of thing could rip apart steel, silence the forest, and leave behind no sound but the wind? Marcus backed away, slow at first, then faster. Each pedal stroke felt like fleeing a nightmare you can't wake from. And still behind him, the trees didn't move. But he swore. They watched. And as he rode, faster and faster, heart hammering louder than the tires on gravel, a single thought echoed louder than reason. Something had been waiting in that forest, and it had decided today was the day to strike. And the worst part, it wasn't done yet. Marcus didn't remember turning the bike around. He didn't feel his feet pressing the pedals or his hands gripping the handlebars. All he knew was the sound, the horrible, echoing absence of anything human. Not a voice, not a scream, just that soft crunch of tires rolling over gravel as he fled through a forest that suddenly felt miles too quiet. Every sound behind him became amplified, a twig snapping, leaves whispering in the wind. The shifting hush of brush. Was it just the breeze, or something matching his pace? When he reached the parking lot, the world tilted. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. He dropped the bike, just let it fall. 2 hikers, just arriving, froze when they saw him. His face pale as ash, his lips dry and twitching, eyes locked on the tree line behind them, like something was about to walk out. They asked if he was okay. He didn't answer, just stood there, breath uneven, muttering. Not full sentences, only pieces. Accident. Something's out there. It took them. The emergency call was made fast. By the time the search crew arrived, the sun had shifted, and the shadows grew longer across the trail Marcus had just escaped. It didn't take long for them to find what was left behind. Patrick's body was found first. He was slumped beside a fallen log, chest caved in like someone had sat on him with the force of a wrecking ball. The medics couldn't explain the trauma. It wasn't crushing in the usual sense. It was targeted, precise. Nolan was found next, nearly 200 meters away. His head was twisted at a brutal angle. Not torn off, but nearly. Like something had yanked and stopped halfway through. Blood soaked the soil beneath him, already darkened by time. They found the broken bikes. They found the ripped glove, still clutching pine needles. And they found the footprints again. Those same monstrous impressions, wide and long, with no claws and no shoes. Just skin and earth. The tracks veered off into the woods, deeper than the rescue crew was willing to follow. They stopped when the prints disappeared into thick undergrowth, as if the creature had simply stepped into another dimension. That night, the official statement came fast. Wildlife attack. Most likely, a black bear, they said. Spooked, maybe. Behaving erratically. The kind of thing that happens once in a generation. But even the rangers said, off record, that it didn't sit right. One admitted they'd never seen a bear twist a bike frame into scrap or deliver wounds that looked personal. And still, Marcus couldn't sleep. He stayed in town just long enough to give a statement, if you could call it that. The police report described him as dazed, possibly traumatized. He was cooperative but distant. Couldn't or wouldn't describe what he saw in the trees before it happened. Only said one thing that stuck with everyone in the room. It followed us, he whispered, for miles. I think it chose them, not me. He left a week later. Didn't tell anyone where he was going. Didn't leave a number. He sold his bike. Never went near the trail again. And yet, sometimes, locals say they still see him, driving past the edge of the woods, never stopping, eyes locked on the tree line like he's making sure it's still in there. But here's the part that chills me more than anything. The detail that never made the papers, that only those on the recovery team whispered about later. Late at night, over drinks and unease. On the trunk of a tree, 20 feet above the blood-soaked trail, they found a scratch. One long gouge running deep into the bark, fresh and jagged. Too high for any bear. Too deliberate for chance. Like a signature. Or worse, a warning. The forest was closed for a week. That part made the news. Temporary trail shut down following a wildlife incident. What didn't make headlines was the tape strung between trees, like a quiet warning. Or the way rangers stood too still at the edge of the clearing, eyes fixed on something beyond the trail, beyond explanation. Locals avoided the area entirely. The story started up almost immediately. Whispers in the diner, a neighbor swearing he heard low, heavy breathing outside his cabin 2 nights after the attack. Someone else mentioned the woods had been too quiet ever since, as if the birds had learned something they weren't supposed to know. But it wasn't just the stories that fed the fire, it was the details that couldn't be ignored. The footprints, for one. Those massive bear impressions that had no business being there. That didn't match anything in the wildlife database. They'd been measured, photographed, cataloged, and then quietly removed, as if someone wanted to erase them. And when people asked for follow-ups, they were met with shrugs, vague reassurances, and the repeated phrase, "It was a bear." Nothing more, except bears don't move like shadows. Bears don't drag bodies in 2 different directions. And bears sure as hell don't watch you for miles without making a single sound. Marcus, wherever he is now, still hasn't spoken publicly, but a friend of his, someone who helped him pack before he left town, shared something that still sticks in my mind. He said Marcus wouldn't go near the woods, not even to say goodbye. He kept looking over his shoulder, checking the treetops, like it might be up there. And when asked what he saw that day, Marcus didn't speak for a long time. Then finally he said, "It didn't move like anything I've ever seen. It didn't make sense. It didn't need to." And just when you think the terror ends with Marcus, with those broken bodies, with the silence that followed, there's this. 2 weeks later, a group of college kids hiked a nearby stretch of trail farther north. One of them, a girl from Roanoke, went missing for 5 hours. When she was found, curled up beneath a downed tree, she couldn't speak, not a word, just stared past the rescuers with wide eyes and bleeding palms, like she'd clawed her way through something to get out. The only thing she eventually said, 3 days later, in the hospital. That's when you realize, whatever this thing is, it's not just passing through. It's watching, waiting, and it doesn't always kill. Sometimes it lets you leave just so you can spread the fear. So maybe the real question isn't what killed Nolan and Patrick. Maybe the real question is, what's still out there? And who will it choose next? Sometimes it's not the thing itself that terrifies us. It's the silence it leaves behind. The trail reopened after a week, but it never felt the same. The tape was gone. The headlines faded. But something in the woods had shifted, and people felt it. Hikers didn't linger. Campers packed lighter, stayed closer to firelight, avoided that stretch near the ridge, and every now and then, someone would stop mid-step and glance over their shoulder, not because they heard something, but because they didn't. Marcus was long gone by then. He hadn't told anyone where he was going, but a ranger said his name showed up on a guest list for a wilderness retreat in New Mexico. A place with open skies and no trees tall enough to hide behind. He left without a word. No closure, no answers. Only one final whisper to a neighbor before driving off. I just need to be somewhere it can't watch me. But Appalachia didn't forget. Word got around. People began to share old stories that had never felt real. Until now. Tales passed down from old loggers and Cherokee elders. Stories of something that walks like a man, but isn't. Something ancient, camouflaged by the land itself. It waits, it watches, and sometimes it hunts. One of the local trail stewards, a man named Earl, who'd spent 4 decades mapping paths across that terrain, started locking his cabin door at night for the first time in years. He said it wasn't the attack that got to him. It was the trees afterward. And then came the recordings. A pair of wildlife researchers, setting up motion-triggered cameras near the site of the attack, caught something. One clip, recorded 3 nights after the reopening, showed the edge of the trail, normal, still, silent, until a shape moved. Fast, blurred, too tall, and then it stopped, just at the edge of the frame. No eyes, no face, just a presence, and then the camera shut off. The battery, fully charged, drained in seconds. Gone. Gone. Like the thing knew it was being watched and decided to return the favor. But what keeps me up at night? What claws its way into the edges of your thoughts when you think you're alone? Isn't the deaths, or even the footage. It's something Marcus said once when asked why he thought it didn't kill him. Why he was the one who made it back. His eyes went distant, his voice hollow. This thing, whatever it is, it doesn't just hunt. It chooses. It waits. And sometimes, it marks you. So the real question isn't whether it's still out there. The question is, once you've seen it, once it's seen you, how far do you have to run before it decides you've gone far enough? Because not everything in the woods is meant to stay hidden. Some things come out when they're ready. A few months passed, and with them, the sharpness of the headlines dulled. Time does that, blurs horror into rumor, carves the unimaginable into stories people can handle. But out there, beyond the paved roads and the safe spaces of human-made light, the forest remembered. And so did Marcus. He kept moving. Never stayed in one place more than a few weeks. No social media. No online trace. But once, just once, he sent a voicemail to his cousin back in Virginia. 1 minute long. Crackly. Unstable. The kind of message that makes you feel cold without knowing why. He said, "It's not just the woods. It's the silence it brings." I wake up and the birds are gone. I swear I hear it at night, like it's outside, but not quite. Real. If I disappear, tell them it wasn't a person. And then nothing. Meanwhile, hikers who dared to return to that section of the Appalachian Trail began reporting oddities. At first, it was just the sensation of being watched. Then it got stranger. One man claimed his dog refused to enter a particular stretch of trees, stood frozen, tail down, whining like something unseen was already waiting. Another woman said she heard her name being whispered from the darkness, though no one else was nearby. She left mid-hike, never looked back. And then came the audio. A backpacker from Kentucky recorded overnight footage on a trail cam near the attack site. For hours, It was just wind and insects, like breathing, but impossibly deep, wet, deliberate. And then a whisper. Just 3 words, drawn out, almost playful. You came back. The man deleted the footage the next day, burned his tent, and left the woods barefoot. He said he couldn't risk taking it with him. But here's the twist that ties everything in a knot. Something the investigation never released publicly. Something shared only among a few rangers and MTs who responded that day. Patrick's body, crushed chest, massive trauma, had one other injury no one could explain. On his back, carved shallow into his skin. Not enough to kill, but deep enough to last. Were 3 parallel scratches. Perfectly straight. Spaced like fingers. Not torn. Not chaotic. Almost ceremonial. Like a mark. A tag. And Marcus. He had the same 3 lines across his shoulder blade. He just woke up with them 3 days later. Back when he was still trying to pretend it was trauma. Stress. Anything but what it really was. So now we're left with a choice. Believe the story. Or write it off as folklore. Blame a bear. Blame the dark. Blame the woods. That's easier. That's safer. But some truths don't need your belief to exist. Because the Appalachian Trail still runs quiet through Washington County. And that stretch of forest, where light feels heavy and silence comes too fast, still waits, just like it always has. And maybe, just maybe, it's already chosen who's next. They buried Nolan and Patrick on a warm afternoon in late July. Closed caskets. No photos. The kind of funeral where no one knew what to say because nothing made sense. People whispered about wildlife, about freak accidents, about trauma, but nobody talked about the marks. Nobody asked about the silence in the woods. And no one dared to mention the thing they all felt but couldn't explain, that whatever had taken those men was still out there. And it is. You feel it when the wind dies too quickly, when the birds vanish mid-song, when you step into that one patch of forest where everything just stops. You feel it in your spine, in the hair on your arms, in that sudden tightness in your chest that doesn't come from exertion, but from instinct. Something is watching. Something has always been watching. And now, people wonder, what was it? Was it Bigfoot? A rogue cryptid? A spirit? A curse? A predator nature never meant us to meet? Or something else entirely? Older than myth, smarter than instinct, and crueler than chance? Maybe that's the worst part. Not knowing. Not being able to name it. Because when you can't name something, you can't fight it. You can only run. The Appalachian Trail has seen its share of legends. But this is different. This isn't a campfire story told for fun. This happened. Blood was spilled. Something moved through that forest with purpose. It didn't just strike. It selected. It marked. And it vanished. Which means one thing. It could come back. So, the next time you're out there, in the woods, far from reception, far from help, remember this. The silence isn't always peaceful. Sometimes it's a warning. Sometimes it's the moment just before something decides it's your turn. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever seen something in the wild you can't explain? Heard a sound that didn't belong? Felt eyes on you when no one was there? Drop your story in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you want more true encounters like this one. Turn on that bell, because next time, the forest might speak first.